Okay, let's look at the 90s at 9 here. This will be a series of videos, probably 3 or 4 videos, because I'm going to take you through the entire process from all the way from the music library up to the show on the air. So let's start with the music library. The software I use for that is Natural Music. It's from Natural Software, the same folks that do Natural Log. And we'll look at the music library here. So, you know, the library kind of, the way you structure it depends on what the show is. So you kind of have to have a pretty good idea of, you know, a good definition of what the show is going to be before you start building the library. And in this case, we looked at, obviously it's a 90s show, so that means music from the 1990s, but we looked at the station that it's running on, which is an adult contemporary station. It actually also runs on our classic hit station. But that defines, you know, what stuff from the 90s we're going to play. So things like grunge bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and that stuff isn't going to play on this show, even though those were big 90s songs, because we're on a station that plays, you know, the new Taylor Swift song. And so you're not going to go from Taylor Swift into Alice in Chains. That's not going to work. So that's kind of how we set things up with the box of where the song is, or where the show is going to reside. And so with that in mind, we start building the library. There are a bunch of categories here. I've used this software for several different shows over the years. I did a 2000s show, I did an EDM show, and I also used this to run our 24/7 music logs on the Top 40 station before we switched that over to the LRN music service. So there's a lot of categories and stuff in here that don't apply to the 90s show. So I'll just show you the stuff that applies to the 90s show. And you can see all of these song categories here are labeled with a letter and then a description after it. And so the way I structure this show is I divide all the library up into several different categories, and that way I can kind of control which songs we play more often than others, because for any kind of show, any kind of music format, you don't just want to shuffle the songs and play them randomly. You have certain songs that are bigger and more important to the format, your core songs, your core artists, and those are the songs that people want to hear when they turn that show on. And so you want to make sure you're hitting those big songs more frequently than other songs that are still important, but not songs that are as big as the big ones. And so that by doing that, setting up into different categories, you can control the speed at which, or the frequency at which you play certain songs. And so for the 90s show, I divided the biggest hits up into 2 categories. I've got a 90s pop heavy and a 90s pop light. And if we go into the 90s pop heavy here, I have 125 songs in this category. And these are the real big hits. These are like the number ones, the top 10s. These are the massive hits. These are the songs that when you think of big hits of the 90s, these are them. And of course, all of this stuff is arrived at by doing a ton of research. And it helped me because I was in my late teens and early 20s and working in radio in the 1990s. So I was doing on-air shifts playing these songs when they were new. So I already understood this format pretty well. But even so, you still go through and you do a lot of chart research. You look at what songs were hits and what songs weren't. You look at like their longevity and things like that. And in this case, I kind of used the Billboard Hot 100 chart as my basis for determining what song was a hit. Pretty much everything in here charted on the Hot 100. That's not exactly a strict rule, though, because this is kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but the Hot 100 rules changed in the late 1990s, where songs up until that point, it was like 1998, songs up to that point had to have a physical single release in order to be eligible for the Hot 100. So a lot of the early songs from Matchbox 20 didn't even chart on the Hot 100, even though they were big hits. So you do have to really get in there and understand the format. To build a music show like this, you have to really know the music. So in this case, these are all really big hits from the 1990s. You know, Britney Spears' Baby One More Time. We've got Cher's Believe in there. That was a #1 hit. We've got Hold On from Wilson Phillips, #1 hit. These are massive #1s or top 10 hits. And then I have my pop light category, which are still really big hits, but maybe not necessarily the #1s. There are still some #1s in this category because I split it up into 2 categories in order to not always play the same songs at the same time in the show. So we're not always going to have Vision of Love from Mariah Carey be the first song in the show. You know, it's going to shuffle around a little bit. So by dividing those really big hits up into 2 categories, I can control a little more over where the songs play and make them move around a little bit more. So I have 204 songs in my pop light category, and another 125 in my pop heavy category. And those are the really big pop hits of the 1990s. In addition to that, I have a category for 90s dance. Obviously, Eurodance was really big, especially in the first half of the decade, but even towards the end of the decade, we had groups like Fatboy Slim and things like that. Some of the EDM stuff, Robert Miles' Children was popping up and becoming a pop hit. Of course, this is all crossover stuff, but it is on the dance end of the spectrum. You know, CNC Music Factory, Black Box, Planet Soul, Scatman John, Technotronic, stuff like that. This is, of course, all stuff that you want to play in a 90s show, but you don't want to play too much of it. You want to stay more in that centralized pop area. And so by putting this into its own category, I can just play one song out of this category each show and limit the amount of dance stuff that we get into. And then the same is true for rap. These are rap songs. There's 49 of them in here. These were all crossover hits. They're not the really hardcore, heavy gangster rap stuff, but they're like the MC Hammer and the Coolio and the Criss Cross, stuff like that. That was rap songs, but they also crossed over, and most of them were top 5 hits on the Hot 100 as well. Moving down here, I've got an R&B category. This is the more urban stuff. You know, the Jodeci, Aaliyah, Monica, Brandy. En Vogue is in here, Boys to Men, New Edition, that kind of stuff. Again, this is big stuff from the 90s, but you want to be able to kind of control the flavor of the show, and especially in Wyoming, you don't want to get too urban. So I put this into its own category. There's 121 songs in the R&B category. I have an adult contemporary category. This is the real light stuff. This is the songs that were really big hits on the adult contemporary charts. They crossed over to the Hot 100, but they weren't maybe quite as big on that chart as they were on the adult contemporary. Stuff like Rick Astley, Bryan Adams, Everything I Do It For You would be in here. Some of the Rod Stewart acoustic stuff, Taylor Dane, Luther Vandross, that kind of stuff, Amy Grant. All that's going to be here in this category, and I've got 160 songs in that adult contemporary category. I have a category for alternative and rock. This is where stuff like the Soup Dragons, Third Eye Blind would be in here. There was a lot of alternative rock stuff in the 90s that was pretty radio friendly. There's a lot of also crossover stuff from bands like Aerosmith. They had I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, the big song from Armageddon. There was some John Mellencamp stuff, some Tom Petty. These rock bands, Van Halen had a top 40 hit in the 90s. So that stuff all goes in here. Also in here would be the pop punk stuff like Green Day and things like that, that would be still, on the pop chart stuff, not their real hardcore heavy punk stuff, but the songs that were more, top 40 hits are in this category as well. And so 131 songs in here. I play one song out of this category every show. And so we get a little bit of the rock flavor in there without getting too heavy into it. And then I have one more category, which is up here. It's the F category. This is what I call the 90s nugget. These are songs that you definitely want to play, but you really want to be careful how often you play them. These are like the novelty songs from the 90s. I'm Too Sexy by Right Said Fred. Barbie Girl by Aqua. Ice Ice Baby from Vanilla Ice. All that kind of crazy stuff that you want to play, but you don't want to play it all the time. If you played Barbie Girl every 2 weeks on the 90s at 9, people would get really sick of it. But you do want to play them. And so in this category, I have 117 songs, but I only play one song out of this category a week. The last song on the Friday show is a song from this category. And that makes it a kind of a special thing, too. I can set it up. I can talk about it. I can do the whole story of the song and play it. And so, we'll play I'm Too Sexy by Right Said Fred. But if you look at this, 117 songs and only one song a week plays out of there, we're looking at almost 2 years before this category turns over and we play that song again. So we don't overplay that crazy stuff, like the B-52s version of the Flintstones theme that was from the movie. That was a big hit in the 90s, but it's not a song you're going to want to play nearly as much as you're going to want to play something from Wilson Phillips. So by putting these things into these categories, you can control how frequently you play these songs. And let's talk just kind of quickly about how the categories work. You can think of it as a card file system where you have boxes of index cards, and you take the card from the front and it has a song written on it. You play that song, you stick that card at the back, and then you take the next card from the front, and so you rotate through that entire stack of cards that way. That is kind of how it works, but it actually is more complicated than that because there are a bunch of rules that you can set up in here. So let's just take a look at this song here. This is the Primitives Crash. This is from the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack. Again, this is a song that is in the 90s nugget category. It's a song you don't want to play all the time, but it's a song that people are going to hear and they're going to go, oh yeah, I remember that song. Or they're just going to groove on it, but you don't want to play it again for another year. But let's just take a look at it. I'm going to double click it, and we're going to look at the card entry for this particular song. Obviously, we have our title and our artist categories in there. We have the file that it is in the automation system, the length. The end type is not really necessary for the way I'm doing the show here, but that just means, does it fade out, or is it a cold ending? The category it goes in obviously is there, but the most important stuff is over here on the music coding tab. So if I click on this, you can see we have a bunch of parameters that we can enter for each song. In this case, we have gender, which is the voice singing. It's a female singer on this song. We have our tempo in and our tempo out. You know, some songs start slow and end fast. So this determines how fast the song is. We have several options in here from slow, medium, fast, and fast. In here we have the intensity. A song like Chumbawamba's Tub Thumping. I get knocked down, I get up again. That's a pretty intense song. So we're going to put that high on the intensity list. But something like Rod Stewart's Have I Told You Lately is a real mellow tune. And so that would be a low intensity song. We also have the mood. Is it an upbeat song? Or is it a real downer like Bruce Springsteen's Streets of Philadelphia? You know, stuff like that. So you can get the mood of the song in here. And then we also have a style. Is it more of a rock flavor? Is it country like Shania Twain? You know, obviously had a bunch of crossover pop hits in the 90s. You can categorize stuff by this. And so once you get all of these parameters in here, now you can set up rules in the music software to do things like don't play more than 2 downer songs back to back. Don't play more than 3 female singers back to back. And that way, it kind of works like it starts to do things like an actual DJ would do as you're doing a live show and you're getting into the flow and you're making sure that these songs flow nicely. You're not going to want to get down into a rut and play, 4 or 5 real slow downer songs back to back. It's just going to kill the energy of the show. But likewise, you don't want to stay up on real hard, intense, hardcore dancing songs too much. So you want to kind of make sure this stuff flows and flows logically as well. And so by setting up these rules about, how many songs from each of these parameters to play in a row, it's going to start figuring out as it pulls these songs from the card file and it comes up with one, it's going to look at these rules and say, okay, this is a real fast song. What did I just play? Is it another real fast song? Can I go ahead and play this or should I wait and play it later? And so it's going to maybe not always pick the next song in the card file. It might dig through a couple before it finds a better song to schedule in there. And in addition to that, it's going to look at artist separation as well. So here we have a Paula Abdul song. If it's going to try to play a Paula Abdul song from this category, it's going to look and see if it already played a Paula Abdul song, because you don't want to, on an hour-long 90s show, you don't want to play 2 songs from the same artist in the same show. And in fact, I don't want to play a song from Paula Abdul if I played her yesterday on the show. So I have an artist separation rule in there that goes back 24 hours. It looks to see if we played a Paula Abdul song yesterday, and if we did, it's not going to schedule the song. It's going to dig into the card file a little bit and pull out a song that doesn't violate any of those rules, schedule that song, and it's going to leave Paula Abdul at the front. So the next time it comes back to this category, it'll go ahead and try to schedule it then. So that's kind of the basic definitions of the categories. Once you get those done, you need to set up some clocks to tell it when to play each song from each category. And I have 3 different versions of the clock. The main reason for having that many versions is so I can kind of shuffle around where the categories play. I'm looking at the 90s A clock right now, and you can see down here on the assignment grid, I play this clock on Mondays and Wednesdays on the show. And so looking here, you can see the category names or the numbers where it starts here. So we start with a 90s pop heavy. That's you want to open the show with something big. And so we start with our pop heavy category. We go into a dance song after that. We come from the dance song and go into a 90s pop light. Then after that is an adult contemporary song. And then we go into our first commercial break. We come out of that break with an alternative and a rap song, and those tend to be kind of the more out on the edge of the box songs, so I put them together there. Then I have a voice track in there that breaks those up. We come back with another 90s heavy. We do our R&B and a 90s light. There's another commercial break in there. There's an adult contemporary song scheduled here that is actually a filler song that doesn't play very often, and I'll get into that once we do the audio vault side of things here. And then we have another pop light and a pop heavy to end the show. That's our A clock. The B clock is similar to that, but it runs on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And basically, it's the same song categories, just in a different order. I shuffle it around a little bit. We open with a pop light instead of a pop heavy. We do the pop heavy next. Then we do our alternative and R&Bs there. We come back with a pop light and an adult contemporary. And we go into another pop light. Our rap song gets stuck in there. And then we have another adult contemporary filler, and we end with a pop light in this show. And then the C clock is basically an A or a B, but it has that 90s nugget at the end of it. That's just the Friday show. So we have that F category, the 90s nugget, to end the show there. And then these songs here are in a slightly different order as well. So that defines, it tells it to play a song from these categories in these orders, and that's how it generates a log.